This was so good, 10 out of 10. And I like it. Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing two different recipes. So the first one that we're making tonight is going to be a lemon chicken gnocchi pasta dish. So I've never made this before, and I will link both the recipes below. And the recipe for this one is not naturally dairy-free, but I am just going to show you the substitutions that I'm going to be making. So what you need is 2 to 3 chicken breasts. I'm going to be using 3. The recipe calls for 2. I'm going to use 3. Half a teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of lemon pepper seasoning, 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 2 cloves of garlic minced, half a cup of chicken broth, 1 tablespoon of lemon juice. This calls for 1 cup of heavy whipping cream, so I am going to be doing a cup of coconut milk. I already have some leftover coconut milk from a separate recipe, so I think in order to make this a little bit thicker, I am going to pull the full fat portion from the coconut milk of another can, because normally when you buy the cans, it separates inside the can, so there's liquid at the bottom, but then the full fat's at the top. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm going to combine this fully liquid form of coconut milk that I use for a different recipe, but then also add in a little bit of just the full fat portion to make it thicker into a heavy whipping cream consistency. So that's what I'm going to do for that. And then it calls for a pound of potato gnocchi. I just got 2 of these gluten-free potato gnocchis that y'all have probably seen before in other recipes. So this is the brand that I like to use, and I just got 2 of these, which is a little bit more than a pound, so it's a little bit more gnocchi than what it's calling for, but I feel like you can never have too much, you know what I mean? It also calls for Parmesan cheese. I'm gonna leave that out. Ryan and I have Parmesan cheese that we could separately sprinkle onto our own pasta, but I'm gonna make the entire dish without it. And then you need 2 cups of baby spinach. I personally, whenever a recipe calls for spinach, I hate leaving this unused. Normally, if you put this whole thing in a recipe, it wilts down so much that it's still not overpowering with spinach. So I'll see how it goes, but I kind of plan on using this entire 5-ounce container of spinach. And then it just says salt and pepper to taste. So essentially what we're going to do is you're gonna take your chicken breasts and you're gonna slice them lengthwise in half. We're gonna season those with the garlic powder and the lemon pepper and cook those fully. So 5 to 6 minutes on each side. And then we're gonna remove the chicken, set it aside, and then all the other ingredients are gonna go into that same pan while we make the sauce, cook the gnocchi, and then eventually add the chicken back in at the end. So it seems pretty simple, and it should just be 1 pan. So let's get started. All right, it is officially done. and it was super easy, just like the recipe said. And I've tasted a few bites of it, and I like it. And I do love a good like lemon pepper seasoning and stuff. Can't go wrong with some gluten-free gnocchi. So I would highly recommend this. I think it's really good. So I hope you guys try it. I did add a little bit more liquid because I did more gnocchi than the recipe called for. And the instructions said to make sure the gnocchi was submerged and to add some more like chicken broth and stuff if you needed to cover the gnocchi, which I did need to do that. So as you saw in the video, I think I ended up doing 1.5 cups of the coconut milk, and then I did kind of like a splash, like little extra chicken broth, and then I just did a little bit of extra salt and 1 more tablespoon of lemon juice. Just because I was adding in more coconut milk and the chicken broth, I also added in another tablespoon of lemon juice. So just wanted to let you guys know those few little recipe adjustments, but I just did that to make sure that I covered the gnocchi because I did more gnocchi than what the recipe called for. So if you do less gnocchi like the recipe calls for, then you probably don't need the extra liquid. But I think it turned out great, and I will see you guys for the next recipe, which will be gluten-free, dairy-free chicken pot pie. Okay, it is time to make our gluten-free, dairy-free chicken pot pie. So I have done my best to go ahead and pull out all the ingredients. We're gonna go through what you need for this recipe. I will link the recipe below, but I will also try to point out some of the things I am doing a little bit differently for it. So let me go over everything that you're gonna need. For the gluten-free pie crust that's gonna go on top, you need 8 tablespoons of unsalted butter. So I'm just gonna use the Country Crock plant-based butter for that. You need 8 tablespoons. You need 2.5 tablespoons of cold water, 1.5 tablespoons of sour cream. I'm going to be using the Forager sour cream. You need 1.5 teaspoons of apple cider vinegar. And then this recipe says for the gluten-free all-purpose flour, it says you use 3/4 a cup plus 2/3 a cup, specifically is what it says. So I'm just gonna use the King Arthur one because that's what I use for pretty much all my recipes. You need 1.5 teaspoons of sugar and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So that's all the gluten-free crust ingredients. And then we're going to do the chicken pot pie filling, and all of that just goes on the stove in one pan, which is nice. So I'm doing things a little bit differently for this, but you need 4 cups of cooked chopped chicken. So I shared this in my last video when I did the grocery haul, but I'm actually going to be using canned chicken just because I knew it would save me a lot of time. And I felt like this recipe might take a little bit longer than I'm used to because I'd be making a homemade pie crust, which I've never done. So this just seemed like it would save time. So 1 can of the chicken is like 1/2 cup. So I have 8 of these to make 4 cups of chicken. You need 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. You need 1/2 an onion chopped. And then the recipe that I'm following and going to be linking says to do 2 carrots diced, 2 celery sticks or stalks diced, and then like some frozen peas and all this stuff. But I've actually opted to just do some frozen vegetables. My mom would use something like this when she made chicken pot pie, and it was always so good. So I'm switching from the recipe a little bit by using frozen instead of hand chopping all of this, but I'll let you know how much I actually use. I went ahead and bought 2 bags, but I don't know if I'll actually need 2 bags worth, but I did get the onion to chop up myself. And then you need 1/2 cup of gluten-free all-purpose flour, again in the actual chicken pot pie filling, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, 1.5 cups of chicken broth. This says 2.5 cups of whole milk, but I'm going to be doing coconut milk, 1 teaspoon of dried parsley, 1/2 teaspoon of thyme. Again, this says 2/3 cup of frozen peas, but I'm just lumping in, there are peas in this, so I didn't get any additional. And then just 1 egg to do an egg wash on top of the pie crust at the end. So that's everything you need, and I personally am just trying to simplify it by doing the canned chicken and the frozen vegetables because everything for the pie filling is going to be relatively simple because it all just goes in one big pan on the stove. So I feel like the main thing is going to be the pie crust, which I'm very curious how that turns out because I've never made one before and I've never done this before. But we're going to start off with the gluten-free pie crust. So let's get going. Okay, here is how it's gonna go in. The crust is like a little bit crumbly. It'll still like kind of mold back together. The edges were just definitely crumbling, but I don't really care how it looks because the crust was always my favorite part of a chicken pot pie growing up. So as long as it tastes good. I also did have a little bit of leftover filling. So I might try to like put the extra filling in like a 9x13 pan or do something with it. But I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the oven at 375 degrees, and I think it said for 40 minutes. Just kidding. It needs an egg wash. Completely forgot to do that. So I stuck it in the oven and then I grabbed it right back out because I was like rereading over the last instructions. And then I was like, oh shoot, I need to do the egg wash. So I'm just gonna whisk up 1 egg and then do that. And it says cook it 35 to 40 minutes. Okay, ta-da! It turned out pretty well. We'll see how it tastes. It did start to spill over on like this one little part, so note to self to make these slits a little bit bigger, I feel like, so that if any filling does kind of want to bubble up, I feel like you would want it to bubble up through here. But I feel like it looks delicious, so it should taste delicious. So we're probably gonna eat dinner and then I'll report back on how it is. I also decided to make a little impromptu vanilla ice cream because I realized I had all the ingredients. So we're gonna have some of that too, but this is 10 out of 10. 2 cans of coconut milk, a cup of maple syrup, 2 tablespoons of vanilla extract, and an 1/8 teaspoon of salt. Super easy, super yummy. Okay, I've got my slice. Obviously, the filling is just gonna pour out like normal, but I did get a little bit of the crust and the flavor's real good. That is good. That is so exciting because the crust is the best part to me. Okay, a few things to note. I probably did like 2 teaspoons of salt in the crust instead of 1. Oh my gosh, the filling's good too. That is pretty good. I was a bit nervous for the crust because I've never made one before, never made a chicken pot pie before, but I feel like this is so good. I ended up doing 1 bag of the frozen vegetable mix because once I saw like how much the recipe was making in my like big saucepan, I was like, there is no way all of that filling is going to fit into that pie pan. So I just did 1 bag and then I followed everything else to a T with seasonings, all the liquids, the coconut milk, the chicken broth, the flour, everything else was exactly what it said. There's a few options for the crust. You can either chill it for 30 minutes in the freezer or like sit it in the refrigerator for hours. I opted in for the freezer option because you start making the crust first, stick it in the freezer, and then you've got 30 minutes of it in the freezer while you make your pie filling on the stove, and it worked out perfectly to where by the time the mixture was done and I had poured it in the pan, it was time to get out the crust. So I feel like that worked out great. But again, this is another one of those recipes where I'm like, you know what, it wasn't as scary as I thought it'd be. Like the crust I was like a little bit questionable about because the edges were kind of crumbling, but I just trusted the process and trusted the recipe and it all worked out. I feel like I've noticed when I go back and edit, anytime that I'm like in love with a recipe, I do this number and I go. It's like I'm like melt into how yummy it is. This was so good, 10 out of 10, very easy. I feel like the crust was a lot easier than anticipated. It came together well, it tastes great. So, highly recommend you try this, but that is going to be it for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed these recipes and comment down below if you end up trying them or if you plan to try them. I always like to know which recipes y'all are enjoying. So, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.